have a full quorum, and if you're ready to start, I would turn it over to you.
All right, sounds good. We'll start off with, would you like me to share my screen with the agenda on it, or does somebody else want to do that?
How do we do this? I think I share the screen, and Rosie, you're taking notes, right? So let me go to my share screen.
Yeah.
Okay, looks good.
Perfect.
Okay.
So we'll go through and take roll call. Nate Reisner's here. Nick Hall, are you here? No, Nick Hall. John Winnis is here.
Yes.
Ann Dunno, are you here?
Yes.
Rick Barrett, are you here?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Jay Christman, are you here? Dan Folk, are you here? Jeff Bauman, are you here?
Yes.
Greg Mason's here. Ed Sterling, are you here?
Yes, I am.
All right, it sounds like we have everybody except for Nick, Jay, and Dan. Am I missing anybody? Sorry, I forgot the MetroPlan staff. Jeff Malbach, he's here. Dave Wessel, are you on the phone?
I'm here. Thank you.
All right. And Rose is here. Am I missing anybody from roll call?
No, but we do have a few guests, it appears, in the room, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, who are our guests?
Hi, it's Phyllis Davis from Kittleson and Associates.
Sorry, I didn't grab your name. Did you say Phyllis?
Yeah, Phyllis Davis.
Okay.
And it looks like we
I
have.
don't think there's crossing a punter. Oh, well, you're challenging my remote sense of geography here for a moment. I think there's nothing. I think if you go south from there, then that's where the
Martin?
either the Arizona Trail or the Schweitzer,
Martin?
sorry, the Sinclair Walsh Trail, both cross
Martin.
I-40.
Martin, can you hear us? You're not on mute, and you seem to be talking to somebody else.
Okay, then it looks like we have Stephen.
Yes, I'm here. You?
Stephen, who are you with?
NAU.
NAU. Okay, do we have any other guests? If I have Phyllis and Stephen also on the line as guests.
I don't see any others.
Nate, this is Ann. Kate Morley may join as a guest a little bit later.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so I think that is all for roll call. If I'm missing anybody that's on the phone that I haven't called, please speak up now. Okay. Then we'll do our call to order. Okay, so we did roll call, public comment. Do we have any public comment at this time? Okay, no public comment. Then we're going to go to approval of minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes from May 27th, 2020?
So moved. This is Ann.
Can I get a second?
Winnis will second.
All right. And Dono makes a motion to approve. John was seconds the motion. All in favor to approve the minutes from May 27th, 2020?
Aye.
Aye. Okay. Any opposed? Sounds like that was unanimous. There's nothing for the consent agenda. So let's move down to general business. General business, item 3A is Transportation Improvement Program, the TIP amendment. And this will be presented by Dave Wessel. They're looking for a staff recommendation of adopting the TIP amendment. Dave, would you take over, please?
Mr. Chairman, and Dave, if you wouldn't mind, if I can just jump in for a second. This is Jeff. I've noticed I just want to make a couple of quick announcements at the beginning. It seems appropriate. Andrew Iacona has moved on, and he used to represent NAU. And I believe Greg Mace is his official representative from NAU on the Technical Advisory Committee. And also Stephen Vidral is here today. I'm not sure if maybe you're both representing NAU, but it's definitely great to have you here today. And we have a very full agenda. I've asked the chairman to rearrange something related to federal funding opportunity, but we have a ton of stuff to get through today, and I just wanted to let you all know that. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Jeff. Dave, you want to take us through the TIP amendment?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have a handful of minor amendments related to some money that's come in for NAPTA as well as for metric plan and for grant preparation. So if you can scroll down to the staff report, or I can bring up the.
Yeah, let me, it just paused on me, so let me get it.
So for NAPTA, I'm actually going to bring up an image here showing some clarifications to their amendments. They received some CARES Act funds, approximately $7.2 million, and some STBG flex funds valued at about $62,000. And so we want to address both of those. And for the for Metro Plan, the Schweitzer Turquoise roundabout had some minor funds available left over, and then there was some unobligated STBG funds. So we were able to work with Patrick Stone from ADOT, who's now moved on to MAG, and package those, loan them to ADOT, and have those returned next year in the form of all STBG, which gives us some flexibility, and that's about $27,000. And then the last thing I want to do is related to the Advanced Transportation Congestion Management Technology Deployment Grant, and that is to identify some funds out in the illustrative year for the purpose of preparing for that grant application. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. So at this point, I would like to share my screen and bring up the NAPTA screen. And can you guys see my screen now?
If you could enlarge it a little bit, that would help.
Yep. How's that?
Yeah, much better. Yeah.
So you can see they're bringing in CARES Act funds and spreading that over a couple years, 1.6 million this year, 5.1 million next year. And then in the STBG and 5307 funds, this is minorly amended from what it was before, as we've gotten clarification on the actual amount. And then they've also included a couple of unfunded projects, and I'd like Ann Dunno to speak to those at this point. One is technology improvements, and the other is this first mile, last mile. So if I could invite Ann Dunno to speak to those two items.
Hi, thanks, Dave. Yes, so the technology improvements for the 445,000 is part of a grant application that's ADOT has out, a NOFA that will be part of that grant. There is approximately $19+ million available. So part of our grant application is going to be this technology for 445,000. So it's a competitive grant, and we would find out in October. That would be for transit technology enhancements like TSP coordination with the city. So that's that grant. The other actually, and maybe NAU, once Steve Vidral is on the phone here, we had anticipated actually using that grant for the NAU campus bus facility to partner with NAU. And I apologize, something's ringing in my house. At this point, I just heard, Steve, maybe you want to weigh in, that there's been a change of plans for NAU. And we are actually, as of today, coordinating with the city to pivot on that grant and put in for bike ped improvements working with the city using local match. So we wanted to have a line item here for the 20 million for bike ped improvements.
I'm not sure what you're speaking of with the change of plans, and is that in relationship to the bus facility or something else?
Yes, I apologize, Steve. I found out today through Dr. Okoli and Aaron that there's been a change of priorities.
Okay, well, it's good to find out.
I apologize for matching the construction.
Okay.
So, we have the design, or most of the design funds for the campus bus that you guys are matching, which is excellent.
Right.
And then we do have a phone call scheduled with you guys on Friday. I believe you're there with Kelly, so we can talk about that more. I apologize.
No problem. I'll just follow up and find out what's going on.
Okay. But I guess in a way, it just demonstrates how flexible we all have to be to work together. I know everybody's agency budgets are somewhat up in the air with the environment that we're all in. So, we were able to have a discussion with the city and MetroPlan about maybe looking at a different approach on that grant. So that unfunded line item would then, to have this in the tip, then would allow us to obligate and move the funds should we be awarded. Does that answer questions? Or Dave, do you want to add on to any?
No, I think that's sufficient. I'm wondering, and if as a result of this, we don't, well, I think we still need to, I think we're okay with the bus center, the bus storage facility. So thank you, Ann. I think that describes that adequately. And then the last thing I want to mention is for the technology deployment grant. My recommendation is to put that in the tip at $9 million, $4 million federal, $5 million local and private. This is, again, it's in the illustrative year, it's the out year. Obviously, it's not programmed at this point, and when at such time we're fortunate enough to have that award and we get that pinned down, we'll move it forward. The reasoning for such a high dollar figure is that we've recently become aware of the prospect of a long haul fiber company that may make substantial investment. And so between that and the opportunity between now and next year to line up other private sector partners, I think having a fairly large amount in the illustrative year is appropriate. So at this point, we are looking to approve, for a motion from the TAC to approve or recommend approval of the TIP amendment to the executive board as presented today. Happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair, I had a question for Dave.
Go ahead.
Yeah, Dave, did you say when you were going to pursue the grant application, did you say what year you're going to do that?
Thank you, John, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. We've elected to defer this application till next year. We'll discuss that in a later agenda item in terms of the details.
Very good. Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Dave on the TIP amendment or discussion?
Yeah, this is Rick Barrett, Mr. Chair.
Go ahead.
I raised my hand. I'm not sure that's working.
I can't see it.
Okay. So reading in the attachments, I noted there was a savings in the Schweitzer roundabout. Can you explain that to me?
Yes, Mr. Chair, Mr. Barrett. We were told there was about $14,000, relatively minor amount. I do not know what the nature of those savings were. But we were told there's about $14,000 in HSIP funds. Our choices were to make this loan as I described and return it in these more flexible STBG funds, or to find another project to transfer that to. And for the amount of effort it would take to, say, adjust the Fourth and Lockett IGA or anything else, it seemed that was a prudent thing to do.
Is it possible to keep it with the Schweitzer roundabout?
You know, we went, if I'm following you, one of the things that we did explore in the past was if there were savings, if those could accrue to the city. And we were told in the past that no, that could not happen. So.
Well, the city's looking at about, I don't know, right? It's uncertain right now. City's looking at overages in the tune of 100K.
Right, and there was, in our past discussions about the roundabout, when there was the prospect for more significant savings, we explored that, and it was determined at that point, or we were told at that point, that we could not have that balance go back to the city.
Is it possible that we could reserve this savings out of this TIP amendment for further discussion?
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead, Dave.
I was going to say right now the STBG funds, the $27,000 was proposed to come back into the general planning administration, and I'll defer to Jeff on expanding on that.
Yeah, this is Jeff. I appreciate the question, and I'm happy to look at that. That's money that I think, as I understand it, it would have lapsed because it wasn't used for that specific project of the roundabout. We were able to secure it again to come back next year. And if we can just appropriate it or assign it back to the project, I think that makes good sense. I just have to figure out the administrative mechanism for doing it. And then also I want to talk offline because I might be missing a step along the way administratively. So I need to get more information from Dave and maybe John Wennis. But I'm certainly open to doing it. I think in spirit, it's a great idea.
Okay, I appreciate that. Thank you.
All right, are there any other questions or discussion for the TIP amendment?
This is Jeff. Yeah, I had a question and a comment.
Go ahead, Jeff.
Is anyone else seeing the TAC packet that was sent out have different tip tables? Are these new tip tables, or am I looking at the wrong packet?
Jeff, so the table that's up on my screen, these are changes that we received after the fact from NAPTA.
Okay, I think you mentioned that, but I was trying to follow along in the packet and didn't keep up. Okay. Thank you. That was my first question. Second comment was, this line 16 technology improvements, I heard kind of a brief description from Ann. Will there be an opportunity for the regulatory agencies like the city and the state to take a look at what's being proposed on their facilities before that goes in?
Jeff, this is Ann, and I apologize. I don't know the level of detail that was being, Estella, our mobility planner, was writing this. And I guess I thought part of this was already in conversation with Metro Plan to some extent. So I don't want to confuse this. This isn't the Alphabet Soup grant, correct, Dave? This is the grant that a portion of the current ADOT grant, that's what these technology improvements we were putting in for part of that grant for technology improvements. At least that was the way it was as of yesterday. I don't know.
And Mr. Chair and Jeff, that's correct, that the technology funds in the unfunded category here, I believe were associated with some of the larger coordination with NAU, and well, and here is, I'm going to go ahead and admit Kate. Kate, are you there?
Perfect timing. She could definitely explain the scoping on this.
Kate?
Hi, I have no idea what you're talking about, but let me help.
Yeah, let me bring you up to speed. We're talking about the TIP amendment. There was a question about the unfunded technology improvements for $445,000. So what exactly are those? And the question from Jeff Bauman is, would the city and partners like ADOT have the opportunity to review what technology, that technology and its impact or presence on their respective rights of way?
Got it. So there's 4 components. It is improved Wi-Fi on the buses. That our real-time arrival app has some significant problems, and so it's getting some new consoles there. It is sorry, I don't have it in front of me right now. It is additional money for some transit signal priority technology. I think, as many of you know, on the Caspar intersection, we're proposed to be a little bit short on that project. And so we're seeing if we can leverage some money here to free up some of the money that we had under the Caspar intersection. It is for mobile ticketing. And the last one is, sorry, I have to think about the last one, but it's also not one I think TSP is the one that would be of most interest to the group in terms of those items. But really the intention is to take what is planned under the Caspar intersection and get some additional funds this way to free up some money under that project, since the construction estimates are over budget. Does that answer questions?
That's really helpful for me. Thank you.
Are there any other questions or discussion for the TIP amendment?
Mr. Chair, just a quick comment. I know that we'd already talked about the HSIP on the 4th Street and Lockett project, but I think, Dave, you mentioned 14,000 for HSIP and it was 17,000, and that's a minor detail. But I also thought we'd just maybe let the group know that Patrick Stone has moved on from ADOT to MAG, and now we have Elise Maza is handling the project and program funding. She's the administrator. So that's just an FYI. It's pretty minor, but just for the group to know that Patrick's moved on to MAG. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anything else in terms of the TIP amendment? All right, is there anybody willing to make a motion on adopting the TIP amendments as proposed?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a motion. This is Rick.
Anybody, was there anybody want to make a second motion?
Well, I don't want to make the motion
Sorry,
you
second
just made.
motion.
No.
Mhm.
I'm not making a motion as shown on the agenda. My motion's going to be different.
Okay, sorry, Rick. Go ahead with your motion.
Okay, thank you. I would move to adopt the TIP amendments, reserving the 17,000 shown for the Schweitzer roundabout for further discussion.
This is Ann. I'll second.
All in favor of Rick's motion to,
Mr. Chair, just,
Go ahead.
you know, at this point, it's typical that you ask for further discussion, and I'd like to discuss this a
Go
little
ahead,
bit
Dave.
further.
ahead.
We've made the loan is in effect. The money's coming back as STBG. It's in the, I'm just kind of thinking out loud here if there's any implications for deferring the action on the HSIP funds that would come back as STBG. And I'm wondering if it's not cleaner just to go ahead and make the amendment as stands and then have the city propose an amendment in the future, perhaps as soon as the next meeting, in terms of how to address that $17,000. My concern is, on the one hand, is the money was going to lapse, but on the other hand, the loan is in place. Jeff Meilbeck, do you have any questions or concerns about this before the motion goes forward for a vote?
Yeah, thanks, Dave. Mr. Chairman, this is Jeff Meilbeck, and I understand the motion to be approval of the TIP with the understanding the 17,000 will be looked at to be reapportioned back to the roundabout. I'm fine with that. I'm fine with that recommendation. I think it gets done what we need to get done here today.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any further discussion on Rick's motion? Okay, we'll move to a vote. All in favor of Rick's motion to adopt the TIP with the amendment to keep the $17,000 to discuss further?
Are you looking for ayes?
Yep.
Sorry.
Yep.
Aye.
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 Aye, and a thumbs up.
Any opposed? Okay, we're gonna move on to item B, which is financial management policy. The recommendation is for staff recommends the TAC to consider adopting financial management policy, or for the board to adopt financial management policy. So are we asking for the TAC for something or the board for something here?
Mr. Chairman, Rosie is going to present this. We're going to ask the board to adopt it. If the TAC has an opinion on it, I'll share that with the board. So Rosie will run through it and we'll go from there.
Okay.
Thanks. I think we just wanted to share with everyone what we were presenting to the executive board, like Jeff said. A financial management policy is standard procedure and really our last big policy that we would like to get approved before being, it's the last step to independence. And this policy is attached. Basically, it establishes principles and a segregation of duties to hold us to a higher standard. It documents our commitments to these standards and routine reporting and things along those lines. That's it. And if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to answer them. But I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We kept it simple and streamlined, so it's easy to follow. And yeah, that's all I have.
Mr. Chair, this is Rick. I just have a comment.
Go ahead, Rick.
Oh, thank you. I didn't feel that this was an issue for the TAC to review, but maybe I'm wrong. So I would just ask for some advice from Metro Plan as to what you would think, what involvement are you looking for from us as TAC members?
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Mr. Chairman and Rick Barrett. I appreciate the question. You know, there's this balance of, I've heard the TAC say they want to be included and we want to bring things past the TAC so they can go on them and get their tracks on them if they choose to. I have to say, this is one I could have just said with you, shared with you and said, I'm bringing it to the executive board. It's very much policy related. It is not technical. But frankly, as we were putting the agenda together, I just said, let's put it all over here and share it. I'm not looking for much. I guess I would say if anyone has objections almost, I would share them. But I think with the board, but I think it's really pretty straightforward. Yeah, that's what I got for an answer, Rick.
Fair enough. I also have to admit I got confused. I kept going back to make sure I was actually looking at the agenda for the TAC. Just in the way the recommendation reads, you know, staff recommends the board consider adopting a financial management policy. It didn't provide me any guidance as a TAC member in this agenda, which is why I asked. So thank you for the answer.
Yeah, it's a good question and a fair point, and we will keep fine tuning our presentation so that it's clear.
Is there any discussion or opinions on the financial management policy that you'd like to share with Metro Plan?
This is Ann with Mountain Line. I don't have anything.
Again, hearing nothing else, then let's move on to the next agenda item. Item C, Title VI plan. Title VI plan, staff recommends board consider adopting the fiscal year 21 Title VI plan. Jeff, I'm going to assume that this is going to be something similar to the policy we just reviewed.
Yes, it is.
Okay. Who's going? Rosie, would you walk us through this brief background?
Sure. The Title VI plan is an annual plan that we do. I'm going to actually change my screen. We did a quick presentation. So can you confirm you can see the annual Title VI plan presentation?
Yes.
Thank you. Title VI is a standard. Title VI came out of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, and compliance with Title VI prohibits discrimination on the grounds of race, color, national origin in any program or activity receiving federal financial assistance. And that's why we follow it, because all of our funding is federal funding. And this Title VI was expanded in 1994 to include environmental justice, to include minority and low-income populations. And that's why it's important that we follow it. Real briefly, our Metro Plan boundaries, I'm sure you're all familiar with them. And within our Metro Plan boundaries, we have people that meet some of these protected categories. Significant Hispanic and non-white population, about 16% of our population in our region is below poverty, giving us ample opportunity to represent them as well as we possibly can. Also, about 3% of our population are limited English proficiency, another population that is protected under these acts. and that we're required to cover in our Title VI plan. In brief, our goals and strategies for Title VI are to make transportation decisions that strive to meet the needs of all people, enhance the public involvement process to reach all segments of the population, covering all of these Title VI requirements, provide the community with opportunities to learn about and improve the quality and usefulness of transportation, improve our data collection, monitoring, and analysis tools to analyze the impact of these plans and programs on our protected populations, avoid disproportionately high and adverse impacts on our protected populations, and of course, comply with the requirements of Title VI and accompanying rules and orders to meet our federal funding guidelines. Some basic ways we do this all the time. All of our vendor contracts use ADOT's Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. Both of our executive board and TAC meetings are open to the public. And we do display a notice to the public at all public meetings, although that has proven a little more difficult in these electronic times. So now it is posted on our website. And of course, the preparation of the annual plan and accomplishment reports, and that we also provide on our website and are available to the public once approved. And that's it. And with that, we hope that the TAC, if you have any questions or would like to know more, we'd be happy to answer your questions.
Thank you, Rose. Is there any discussion that TAC members would like to have about Title VI?
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you, Rosie. This is Anne. My only question for Metro Plan, Mountain Line also has a Title VI plan similar to comply with the same Title VI requirements, although the policy implementation is a little bit different because it's a transit organization. But my one question in terms of what might be, have you changed the public participation process at all? Because if you have, then we just need to update ours because ours is kind of linked to the Metro Plan plan. So that was a question. Have you guys changed anything in the public participation section?
Do you mean particularly because we're holding meetings electronically? Or
I guess it's just really, I mean, I know that as part of being part of Metro Plan and from the FTA, you guys have to post that, you know, this is where public participation for use of federal funds for the federal, you know, all of that's on the agendas typically.
Right.
I just didn't know if there's any other changes to the way you've done public participation in the past that we might need to change ours.
At this time, I don't think we've made any significant changes. Most everything related to public participation has been changes to contact information, who to contact. Obviously, the city, a Flagstaff isn't the primary point of contact any longer, and our website has changed. But I don't think any of our practices are different.
Great, thanks. And I think Heather Domelin was just triggered the thought that we probably need to update ours anyway with contacts, because I think ours are older, referencing a prior GM. So thanks.
Okay, you're welcome.
Great.
Mr. Chair, I just had a quick comment.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I think just going back a few months, ADOT Civil Rights Office was going to do an on-site compliance review with Metro Plan, and due to COVID, they postponed that till January of 2021. So that's just an FYI for the group. So I don't know that there was any other changes afoot in the program, like Ann Dunno had mentioned there. But I think you're in good shape until 2021. Jeff or Rosie or Dave, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think that was kind of due to COVID. We kind of we're letting this thing go until 2021 for any changes.
Yeah.
Does that sound right?
Yeah, that sounds right.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Is there any other discussion for Title VI or question for Title VI? All right, if there's nothing else, let's move on to The next item, item D, Unified Planning Work Program, the UPWP.
Yes.
Go
Okay,
ahead, Jeff.
Yep, thanks. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I just lost where I was on the agenda. Give me 1 second, please. Okay. I'm recommending that the board consider an amendment to the Unified Planning Work Program to reflect projects and priorities that were adopted by the board in June 2020. So I would like the support of the Technical Advisory Committee in taking this forward. I want to point out, and those of you who've been doing this for a while are aware, that the UPWP is a condition of receiving federal funding through the state. We have to keep it current. This year, it's a 2-year UPWP. That's a first. It took us all through fiscal year 20 and now into fiscal year 21. And we've got a few changes here that I just want to, even though we've been through a lot of changes in the past year and a half, I want to capture the main ones in the UPWP to make sure that the document remains relevant. And also want to make clear that it's important to update it because when FHWA and ADOT and FTA come and do a review next spring, this document will serve as a report card. So if there are things we're doing that are not in here, we really need to get them in here. And if there's things we're not doing, that we've changed our minds and they're not in here, we want to go ahead and pull them out now. So I do need to apologize. I noticed the staff report that went out with the packet says the amended UPWP has the following highlighted changes, and it's blank because I didn't type them there. So they are in the document, and if you scroll through the full document, you'll see the red line, the clean version, as well as the redlined version. And I will just tell you verbally that we've made some updates to names of the board members, committee members, staff members, all pretty basic stuff. We've made some updates to the grant writing efforts to be clear on what grants we were going to be writing, because that has evolved over the past year and a half. And we've made some updates to projects. So the signal synchronization technology funding that we'll talk about later in this meeting, a mini grant for small projects that we'll talk about later in this meeting, and then the West Route 66 Corridor Master Plan, really all need to be included in the UPWP since those are things that, we now intend to work on. So there is really no fiscal impact. We just want to make sure the document remains current and relevant. And with that, I would answer any questions and actually ask for the TAC support in sending this on to the board. Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry, I thought it was somebody asking a question. Does anybody have any questions for Jeff on the amended UPWP or discussion? Go ahead, Rick.
For me, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Go ahead, Ann.
Oh, I'm just wondering if you could just kind of walk through the 21 deliverables FY21, which I thought everything looked great, and the goal, how the alignment of the focus areas of the work plan. Maybe just very briefly walk through your desired outcome for this coming year. I think you had a couple of bulleted lists. Sorry, I think I'm not sure if it's. That's right. You had
Mr. Chairman,
and special projects. Thank you.
Yeah, I tried to just say those verbally in my report, and I didn't. Obviously, it wasn't clear. So let me scroll down here and find them because these really are the substantive changes, and they're in the redlined version. So I believe they're up on the screen and you can see them now. Adding in the projects, writing, ATC MTD grant, which is a technology grant for signal synchronization. The other is analyzing the costs and benefits of applying for basically federal loan projects, which is also on the agenda for discussion today. Initiating a $50,000 mini grant process for member agencies, which is for discussion today. And I need to say the last two bullets, the TIFIA funding and the mini grant, came out of our strategic advance. So we got input from the TAC and the board in January, and they said, you know, last January, go do this stuff. And then just a couple of months ago, actually in June, we went through a process and identified that we would be, with support of the TAC and the board, that we would be writing the ATC MTD grant and working on West Route 6 and pursuing funding of bike and ped grants. So those are the big changes, and they're pretty substantive. So that's why I wanted to get them in an amended UPWP.
Thank you, Jeff. Any other questions or discussion for the amended UPWP? Okay, if there are none, let me go back up to the recommendation. So again, to ask for recommendation from the board, are you asking for a recommendation from TAC to bring this to the board? Is that what you're asking for, Jeff?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I apologize for the confusion, but a motion and action from this group would be great.
Okay. Does anybody want to make a motion to bring the amended UPWP to the board for approval?
Yes, Mr. Chair. This is Wenus, I'll make a motion that we bring that unified planning work programming as discussed forward to the board for approval.
Would anybody like to second that
This is
motion?
Ann. This is Ann. I'll second.
Thank you, Ann. John Wenus made a motion and second the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Any opposed? Not hearing any. We're going to move on to the next item. And I believe this is where we're going to do item I. Move item I in front, the Metro Plan's role in federal funding.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the TAC. I want to acknowledge again, this is an extremely full agenda, and it got even more full as of about 3 hours ago when we got some news about a federal funding opportunity. I'm hopeful that we can go through some details on specific grants because Dave Wessel has done a lot of work on them, and there's a lot of detail that can be provided. And we also have the regional transportation plan scope of work that we want to get rolling. And I just don't know if we're going to have time for everything today. So, because we need to stop at 3:30, it's a public meeting and it's posted to end at 3:30. So in the interest of setting priorities, the role in federal funding seems like the most important one for us right now. This item is for discussion only for the board and for the TAC. I'm certainly interested in direction and comments I can add to my discussion with the board next week, but I'm not really asking them to do anything. I'm just trying to illustrate and illuminate some of the things that are happening. So I go back to our work plan all the time. And at the strategic advance in January, the board, with input from the TAC and the management committee, gave us a couple of items. And they said, get really clear on which grants Metro Plan is going to pursue and how you're going to do it. And then also secure at least $2.1 million in resources over the next 5 years that directly benefits member agencies. So, you know, the onus is upon us to go out and help bring some more money into this region. You know, I make clear, and this somewhat is for members of the background, is for members of the board, some of whom are new. It's easy to lose track of the administrative framework for why an MPO exists. So I wanted to make clear about the 50,000 population and our role, because in simplest terms, by virtue of Metro Plan's existence, because these groups, the city, the county, NAPTA, ADOT, NAU, got together and said, we are willing to do planning together and adopt transportation improvement plans and adopt UPWPs. Because this group, this community works together and is for a Metro Plan, we remain eligible for federal funds. And those federal funds can be significant. So Metro Plan itself gets about $750,000 a year. And we use that funding to do our regional transportation plan and other projects. Also, because we exist, it makes us eligible for additional federal funding. And the biggest example of this recently, which is very fresh, is that Mountain Line received a $7.2 million formula grant through the CARES Act in April of 2020. The TIP amendment just, spoke to that. And first of all, I got to say, because Mountain Line is such a robust transit system, they are eligible, they get more money because that's how it's apportioned, by high ridership and so forth. But because Metro Plan exists, we're even eligible for money. And this just goes back a long time. If this community didn't cooperate to form Metro Plan or form an MPO, we wouldn't be eligible for any money. So my point here is, at a basic level, Dave and Rosie and I just need to show up every day. And if we do, it's like standing in the outfield with our glove out, and somebody hits a ball and it just kind of falls in our glove. I mean, it didn't take us, Dave and Rosie and I, any effort for the $7.2 million grant that came to Mountain Line. So that's a very basic level. However, beyond the formula funding, there's opportunity for competitive funding. And before I jump into the competitive funding amount, I'm not sure I was clear enough. It might have been confusing what I shared on formula funding. Are there any questions or comments about that before I steam ahead? Okay, I'm going to steam ahead. All right, beyond the formula funding, we're eligible for competitive funds. And again, if the region hadn't formed an MPO, we wouldn't be. And there's a lot of money out there that can be pursued. The competitive funds are awarded nationally or statewide, and they're based on merit. And they're also hard to win. Compared to formula funds, the fact that Metro Plan exists doesn't really make much difference. I wrote, it's a metaphorical ante in the grant-making game. It gets us in the game, but that's it. The project has to be good. Success is based on the merits of each grant application, and most of them are nationally competitive. And every grant is different, but there's some basic things I just summarized here in terms of, in this page 185 of your packet, is the project ready to build? Do we have adequate local match? Do we have partnerships? Can we demonstrate we're working together? Can we demonstrate we can manage the money if it comes to us? Does it have technical merit? Do we have a reputation as being successful with grants? And then do we have relationships with the granting agencies? They need to understand us compared to other competitive projects nationally. So there's a lot of work to do there, building relationships over time. And as competitive as these things are, I want to point out a real track record of success, and I've put it up on the screen. I think you can see. It's page 186 of your packet. And there's a list here, and this isn't all of them by any means, but millions of dollars that have been received in the late 2005 and 2006 for City of Flagstaff projects, and you know, a lot of projects here for Mountain Line. So this past success of member agencies, I'm suggesting, in winning these grants demonstrates a couple of things. One, it can be won. We can get this money. And two, that this money can be brought to the region and can help us all out. So the question becomes, what is MetroPlan's role? And that's what I'm leading up to. And MetroPlan has been tasked, staff have been tasked by the executive board with pursuing federal funds. And generally our mission is to leverage financial and political partnerships. I mean, so this is baked in to why we exist. And then specifically in our strategic work plan and some tasks that were adopted last June, we had direction to get bicycle and pedestrian funding, pursue signal technology, and then keep looking for COVID-19 related stimulus funding. So with advanced signal technology, and this is a whole other staff report in this, in today's agenda that Dave wrote up, and I just want to give you the highlights. This grant was open July 1st, and we went through a process, Dave went through a process of conducting stakeholder interviews. And one of the things we learned is MetroPlan couldn't apply for this money. It had to come from either ADOT or the City of Flagstaff. And also learned that we really needed to figure out some more details, we as MetroPlan and we collectively, about project scope and management and the agency approval processes. So we had a very full meeting. Dave organized, I don't have the date here, August 17th, to talk about it. And there was a lot of support from both ADOT and the city to say, yes, we want $1 to $3 million to come in, but essentially we just don't have time. It's not enough time to figure out all these details and pull this thing together. So recognizing that it takes time to get these things moving, what we landed on was to defer this to next year. Keep working on it, but really be ready to go next year to apply for this funding. And I'm going pretty quick because there's so much on the agenda, and I'll go and backfill if you all have questions. Right now, I'm trying to really hit the highlights. Essentially, there's a lot for us as MetroPlan to learn from this effort with this particular grant. And one is that these grants need to be shared with the TAC and the management committee. And in fact, they were. I mean, we talked about this in June when this was adopted. But sometimes, you know, communication is always the hardest thing. So we need to be able to talk through the implications on member agencies of funding requirements and getting support of their organizations. And we need to give people a full opportunity to address concerns. And we need to make sure that local match is available. And then probably report on these things every month to the TAC and the management and the board. So we weren't in a position to apply for this funding on August 31st, but we've learned a lot from the process, and I'm confident we're going to be more successful in the future. And again, I want to say Dave has a whole other staff report on the details of this grant. And the purpose of this overall staff report is to highlight all the stuff that's going on. The next item on the staff report, page 188, and I feel like I should stop because I cannot see anybody's faces or body language. Mr. Chairman, do you or does anybody want to jump in before I keep going here?
Yeah, would anybody like to ask any questions of Jeff on kind of the MetroPlan's role that we've been going through? Greg has a okay sign up.
Okay. All right, I'm going to keep going then. Thank you. So bike and pedestrian funding. I wrote this staff report on Friday. I finalized it and made clear that we're working with Mountain Line and the City of Flagstaff to see what transit funds might be available for bike and pedestrian facilities. Because essentially the city has $30 million of local funds apportioned for Proposition 419. And if that money can be leveraged, you know, theoretically, we want to leverage it. This morning, I got a call saying that there's actually an opening that we thought was reserved for NAU, actually, for a transit project. But it's available now to apply for bicycle and pedestrian funding. So we had a very quick meeting this morning, and essentially we have to go through all of these steps very quickly, or just say, you know what, we're not going to apply for the grant. We'll let the $19 million opportunity go. So we need to talk about this in some detail today or after this meeting with the City of Flagstaff and Mountain Line to get clear on the details of pursuing this funding. As important and as time sensitive as it is, I feel like it is maybe this meeting right now with everybody here and all the other items on the agenda, it's not the right time to go really deep on it. So let me just set that out there and we can come back if Mr. Chairman or you or TAC members want to. And the other I'll say quickly is COVID-19 related federal stimulus funding. I mean, we're watching it. There's a lot of activity, particularly from the House. There's nothing clear yet about anything that we can apply for. So as of this writing, there's not that much to do except just continue to monitor and be ready to jump when the opportunity presents itself. And then I will say in terms of format, I'm going to fill out this section 4 based on what I hear from the TAC today and the management committee tomorrow. And then fiscal impact is huge, and I'll just end on the fiscal impact. Although it doesn't cost anything to apply for grants, the bike and ped funding that's available is 80% match. So for $200,000, 800,000 can come in. So of $1 million grant, 800,000 federal, 200,000 local, that's a significant match. And again, I don't have any alternatives here because there's no recommendation. I will say again, I provide this as an overview. Dave has some specific projects that he's developed in staff reports to come. And then, as I said, the whole bike and ped opportunity just really literally popped up this morning about 10:30 a.m. And Mr. Chairman, that concludes my report.
Thank you, Jeff. Does anybody have any questions or any discussion that you want to have on this item?
Nate, this is Ann.
Go ahead, Ann.
I have a question for Jeff and maybe Rick, if he's still on the line with, or the city, basically, about this grant opportunity that's really, you know, just come up. What do you need from this group in terms of willingness or ability to commit to the grant? I get having to have kind of an emergency scoping meeting and figuring out some of the, you know, what the projects might be packaged into the grant, kind of in a separate meeting, but was just wondering if in this meeting we could have the discussion about, I mean, is this something the three agencies, you know, want to commit and go for? If that sounds like it's been generally discussed this morning, but didn't know if there was any follow-up to that other than.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Dunno, I'd like to respond to that. Yeah, there are 5 agencies represented here, and I put this kind of umbrella item on the agenda so we can be clear as a community how we want to move forward with grants, right? Not anticipating we would have this opportunity pop up today. Given that the opportunity popped up today, I guess I have to say, just as candidly as possible, I think it's really up to NAPTA and the City of Flagstaff, or Mountain Line and the City of Flagstaff, how they want to move forward. I don't know that this meeting, including NAU and ADOT, although their opinions are really of interest and this is a partnership, I don't know if it's the best use of their time because the decisions are going to have to come from the other two agencies. Does that answer it?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks. And I guess just by extension, I don't know if Rick, yeah, I see Rick seems to be and Jeff are here. I don't know if we could quickly schedule a sort of an emergency scoping meeting about the grant with Kate and
Mr. Chair, I'm sorry to interrupt. I don't believe I heard in the deadline for the grant was mentioned in the presentation.
It's August 28th. It is next Friday. No,
It is this Friday.
This Friday. Uh-oh.
Yeah, it is kind of literally an emergency grant scoping conversation.
Let me say, no way. No way. Friday? No way. Surprised you asked.
So kind of to bring, I mean, this is the second time I've heard stuff like this within the last couple of weeks. So kind of to get back on to what's being asked here in the TAC, Metro Plan's role in federal funding. This discussion that we've just had here recently, and then one we had, I think it was last week on fiber. I think it's really important if Metro Plan is going to be pursuing some of these federal grants to extremely early in the process, get with the local agencies that would be providing the match. And then once, if a grant is awarded, that would be managing that grant. I highly doubt that Metro Plan's role is going to be managing the grant once it's awarded. I kind of see personally Metro's plan role is trying to coordinate with either one or multiple local agencies that would be providing that match funding and providing that that management of the grant once the grant is awarded, coordinating with them extremely early in the process and getting their input on scoping and help with putting a grant together. Waiting till there's a month left or a couple weeks left, or in this case, a couple days left, there's no way that any of these agencies are going to have staff time and the ability to commit funding for match funds for some of these projects.
Yeah, and I mean, I really appreciate what you, I think, you know, this is definitely not, obviously it's in a reactive situation. This wasn't the original intent of how Mountain Line, this NOFA funding that came out is a kind of a one-time competitive through the state process. There may not be funds like this. It is FTA funding through the state, but this competitive opportunity may not, to this extent, may not come up again. And, you know, we did have something come up with the campus bus storage facility, and we just found that out. So we, knowing we've generally been starting to talk about partnering for leveraging 419 funds and bike and ped, you know, grant opportunities, you know, Mountain Line, I believe, Kate, I don't know if you want to, as a guest, I know you're here if you want to weigh in, because I know you were in those initial conversations this morning. You know, just looking at it as, you know, there's so many bike ped projects that Martin, you know, has worked on that we are all aware of, you know, that potentially could be compiled into a program that would play really well into the eligibility of this grant and the ties to transit. So it's just, we just see it as an opportunity to really enhance our community with infrastructure and leverage our local tax dollars. So Kate, I don't know if you want to.
And I think you spoke to it really well. It's unfortunate the project we had applied for or we were planning has fallen through. You know, we're as bummed as anyone about that. We just see our role here as there's a large pot of money out there with very few eligible applicants in the state. And as Ann said, it's a pot of money that we forecast is going to go away in a pretty significant way. As you saw that list of grants, the Mountain Line had been awarded, the vast majority of them are from this pot of money because there are so few applicants for the funds. So we're here, we're prepared to make a quick shift and write a grant application. If there's, support from partners on doing so, we want to be that partner and help bring the money to the region if we can. So, but apologies, yes, Nate, it's definitely not our intent to do things so last minute.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not necessarily talking just about this grant opportunity. The question that's being brought to us from MetroPlan is, what is MetroPlan's role in federal funding? And again, I think if MetroPlan is going to be pursuing some of these grants, they need to get with these funding partners or agencies that will be providing these match funds and kind of identify prior to some of these grants coming out, or identify a lump sum of money over a period of time that can be used as grant money, instead of for every individual grant that comes up, trying to get people together and organize within a couple of weeks and get a scope identified within a couple of weeks in order to be able to apply for a grant. I understand that this grant that came up today is a little different, but in the overall scheme of things of MetroPlan's role in federal funding, I think some earlier coordination than what's been happening needs to be done.
So, Mr. Chairman and members of the TAC, I mean, I'm hearing a few things, I think, pretty clearly. One, city representative saying, no way, a grant cannot be written in 2 days. And I'm hearing the TAC chair say that MetroPlan needs to start with grant writing early in the process to bring people along, to put the pieces together, and that we have brought you 2 grants now that have not had a lot of time to put them together. And I want to respond to that, but I also want to say I'm hearing Mountain Line, as a TAC member, say they're prepared to submit the grant. So I'd like to talk about that a little bit more. There is something I need to point out, though, as difficult as it may be, as I sent out an invitation and an email to set up a meeting July 20th to talk about this opportunity, and I got no response from the City of Flagstaff to participate in the discussion. So it's difficult to try to coordinate grants. Everybody's busy, but I mean, that's why everybody's busy, but these opportunities, when they come up, we need to be poised to be able to pursue them. So we can't coordinate if people don't come to meetings or respond to emails about multi-million-dollar grant opportunities. So, maybe somebody on the meeting wants to respond to that. What I will say is, I'd like to know if I'm hearing a recommendation from the TAC that we not pursue this funding because we didn't give staff enough time. I mean, if that's what I'm hearing from the TAC, that's what I need to take to the board.
This is Greg. I wouldn't say that. Always apply for a grant, no matter how shabby it is because of a last minute need. I think that goes without saying.
Mr. Chair, this is David Wessel. Can I, maybe offer a comment or a request?
Yeah, go ahead.
Unless we want to talk through the details today, right now, I would request that the city take up the offer from Mountain Line to have a discussion. It does seem like there are opportunities there and extenuating circumstances, if you will, that may address some of the concerns about how expeditious we need to be. And so before just shutting it down, would invite or request that the city have that conversation because I think some of the concerns, perhaps not all, could be addressed and the timeline can be met.
Okay, so that's for this one grant, but what the big question for the TAC agenda is Metro's role in federal funding. Am I correct? Is that what Metro Plan is asking TAC to comment on right now and provide opinions on right now?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman,
Or is Metro Plan wanting to discuss this one grant application? Because I heard during the report that you didn't want to dive deep into this one grant application, and that's kind of what we seem to be doing right now.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, Mr. Chairman, and I think I agree with what Dave is saying, and then the question you're asking at the bottom of page 187, the top of page 188, it says 5 bullets about how Metro Plan will proceed with grants. And I mean, these are the bullets that I kind of pointed out to you, if you all want to take a look at them. And yeah, I'm looking for a direction. If the TAC says, yeah, if you guys go through this, that'll be great. Or if you say to make it better, you need to do some other step, or there's something about these you don't like. That's what I would like feedback on. This grant, yeah, the Bag and Ped one is a one-off. And I just want to say we're looking at, long-term relationships here, long-term efforts that we're building over time. So what we agree here today on Metro Plan's role goes well beyond any one particular grant.
Okay, so for bullet number 2, implementations on member agencies such as local match requirements and staffing impacts will be identified when the grant is present. I think having a meeting with the local agencies that will be providing that local match and the staffing, I think having a meeting with those agencies to kind of get a good idea of what type of match funding they would be capable of doing and the staffing time that they would be willing to contribute to grants and certain types of grants before we start even looking at writing grants would be beneficial. That way, Metro Plan doesn't just after every grant that comes out tries to set up a meeting. Having a good understanding of the capabilities of the local agencies prior to even these grants coming out, I think would be beneficial for all the agencies that would be involved with these grants.
Nate,
Okay.
this is Anne to kind of tag on to what you just mentioned about that sort of strategic coordination role that Metro Plan can play with the entire, with the federal grant and just grant process is, I'm wondering if there's a way to better link up sort of the forecasting of the grants that potentially could be coming out and their values. And then, I mean, I know we do this with lists, but also recognizing that each agency has their capital planning programs that have a process of approval. And once certain things happen within those processing, those funds get sort of earmarked for projects, and being able to link those so agencies are able to really proactively look ahead and see how these grants might come into play based on their needs. I mean, just a little, like a layer deeper in that, that coordination, I think would be helpful from a forecasting and capital planning side for the agencies.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Ann. An ADOT's P2P process on projects that we nominate and that kind of move forward, we look at some of those projects and try to identify any type of grants that would benefit that project. And I think looking at everybody's capital plans and identifying the grants that this region would be capable to obtain and identifying some of that money that might help out with some of the projects would be beneficial. And if there's shortfalls in projects, looking for opportunities to leverage the shortfall money with grant money would also be beneficial.
Is there any other feedback on these items?
I think the bullets are a great foundation. I think once you get these foundations set, kind of digging into them a little bit more to fine tune on how you're going to implement those bullets. I think a lot of coordination with the member agencies on their ability to manage grants and match grants is going to be paramount.
Thank you. That concludes our.
Go ahead, Jeff. Is there any other further discussion on item I? All right, if not, we'll move to the regional transportation plan scope and process approval. Dave Wessel, would you run through this for us, please?
Mr. Chair, thank you very much.
You know what, can I jump in again,
Yeah.
Dave and Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
There's two more items here that are about funding that are the specifics, and they really kind of go together. I know they're just information, and I know that Dave is really looking for direction on the regional transportation plan. So I wonder, I just, before we steam ahead, because we won't have time to do everything, can I ask Dave if you have a preference between getting feedback on the RTP or sharing the information on the two grants?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Jeff, yeah, let's cover the RTP, please, and then I can be very quick on the other two grants when we get to them.
Thank you.
So, Mr. Chair, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen with a quick presentation on the RTP. So can everybody see my screen?
Yes.
Excellent. So, close up. There we go. So historically, we've had a relationship between the regional plan, RP in the screen here, and the regional transportation plan, RTP. And it looks like what we have on the screen here. The regional plan sets a policy, a direction, and provides a context. And this really started with kind of our second or our first official region RTP, where we actually worked together with the city and the county and the very first regional plan. And the transportation element really drove our RTP. But then in the subsequent RTP, we're on a 5-year cycle. The regional plan is on a 10-year cycle. So we get to do this twice for every time the city and county work on the regional plan. We put together a transportation plan, which is more detailed than you would see in a regional plan. We also put together a program of projects for that 20-year period. And we have pushed new ideas, tools, and analysis to really advance planning in the region. And then the next cycle, the regional plan takes up those advances, sometimes using them, sometimes not. Creates new policy, focuses direction, and provides a sharper context. I think a good example of this is the evolution of activity centers, where that first regional plan back in 1997 said, let there be activity centers. And in our RTP, following RTP, we said, where? And worked on defining where those should be and set up some criteria. And in the next regional plan, those were taken up and actually identified on a regional plan land use map, and criteria and standards regarding those were developed. And that really helps us then to understand, well, what's the land use that we're trying to serve with the transportation plan. So that's been the cycle here. And what we're looking for today is, is this a role or relationship that we want between the regional planning process, the regional transportation planning process, and do we have a scope of work that we're going to present here shortly that meets that expectation. So we'll get to that in just a moment. So in any good planning process, there's strong public participation, and we have, along with other partners in the Milton Corridor Master Plan, learned some things about public participation, including this tool, if you will, or spectrum from the International Association for Public Participation, IAP2, that Sarah Dechter shared with us. And there's a spectrum that goes from inform, consult, involve, collaborate to empower, with empower being kind of the ultimate public participation. And a good example of that is we did the RTP, we worked with the Citizens Tax Commission and empowered the voters to actually vote on what that would look like. And we're successful in 2 out of 3 items. So you can see here we have goal and promise, and I'm not going to walk through each of those with you. But generally, if you look at the bottom row, is something that I've tagged on to this diagram to say that we want to work with the public steering committee, which we would recommend being formed to guide the process or help guide the process. Then the TAC Management Committee and Executive Board, that's TAC, MC, EB there, work with all of those groups up through the involved level. And then really, as we get more focused, working collaboratively with the steering committee and the Metro Plan committee structure. And then in the last step, really it's the Executive Board that would adopt the RTP with really, we would be looking for strong recommendations, hopefully because of a well-managed process by the TAC and Management Committee. So that's what we're thinking in terms of public participation at this point right now. I want to kind of flash through these next few slides, which shows the scope of work, and we're seeking endorsement of the scope of work if you think we're ready at this point in time, and I'll walk through that in a little more detail. So task 1 through 4, we want to refine the scope of work and plan after we get a consultant on board, and we're looking at a budget of about $250,000, and to come up with a good management plan and a good communications plan and an escalation ladder. Again, lesson learned, issue escalation ladder, a good lesson learned from the Milton planning process. I just kind of walk through the public participation effort and really expect a good solid plan and good demonstration that they understand that a consultant understands that continuum, and then solid analysis of what we learn. And then your kind of standard background information in terms of demographics, trends, and conditions. And really, again, want a strong policy analysis and implications for what these means. It doesn't tell us a lot if we say, hey, your population is getting older. Well, we need the so what out of that. But part of that background information that we would be looking for includes some land use background. And let's evaluate some of the recent developments that we've had in the city, in the region, like the hub, and really, see where that's going. Then again, a lot of kind of standard stuff that you will see. We want to do some benchmarking. We want measures. We would like to see targets actually set for some of these performance metrics. And, targets help move needles. And of course, Metro Plan doesn't do a lot. in terms of moving those needles itself. So we would need to work closely with our member agencies and get buy-in on any targets that are set. The tools that we have, we want to revisit scenario planning and work closely with that regional plan handoff. Ideally, we're going to have the same scenarios that are evaluated in the RTP, and then subsequently the regional plan, which is coming right on the heels of the RTP. I think most of you are familiar with our cost model. Our travel model is coming along nicely and hope to present its that next month. And then we also have a benefit cost analysis tool. Some of the additional analysis that we want to do is equity, some equity and accessibility. I think our regional model will lend itself to the accessibility where, let's, pick a traffic analysis zone in an area somewhere in the city and say by all of the modes available, what's accessible within 20 minutes. And it could be a 20-minute walk. Can you get to, how many jobs can you get to? Can you get to groceries? Can you get to medical facilities? So it's really, and then looking through that of a lens of equity in terms of some of the Title VI that was referenced earlier. We would like to kind of review our selection process. We know full well that 419 and 420 are set, and that funding stream is moving forward. However, since the last RTP and even since the 419 and 420 were passed, the Climate Action Plan and now a climate emergency have been passed and adopted. And so there's a kind of a new lens to review these things through. And again, if we have measures and targets, how do we project how well we do against those? We want to update costs. Again, we have those funding streams in place. Mountain Line, ADOT, everybody, the county has their funding streams, but we want to work closely with them to revisit those, see how costs have changed and if we're still on track for delivery of programs. We want to cost out ITS. This kind of ties into that technology deployment grant to really better prepare for future grant applications. And then one of the things that we've been hearing quite a bit is operations and maintenance. TSMO, Transportation Systems Maintenance and Operation, maybe an acronym you hear. And so really, we've addressed maintenance costs in the past, but we have not really quantified them very well. And there's, I guess, just perpetual questions about, do we, as we expand our systems, do we have what it takes to maintain and get the most out of them? And so we'd like to kind of drill down on that question a little bit, because that will be, or may very well be, the next question that comes up for voters is this in the renewal of 403 and 406, and maybe we'll have a sense of what that looks like. I talked about funding, and then the last item, last couple items, is really developing alternative programs that look at the things through these new lenses of climate action and equity, influences in terms of the sequence of those programs. We know what the projects are. Is there, can we look at the sequence of projects to better advance these objectives like climate action? Can we, in so doing, look at grants, as Jeff mentioned in his report that he just finished? Can we work with our partners in their capital budgets to say, we think there's a grant coming up, opportunity coming up, we need to reserve some match dollars and maybe work that into this program evaluation. And of course, at the end of the day, those CIPs are the discretion of our member agencies. So, this is something that we need to work very closely with you. And then, as you just mentioned, working those life cycle costs into those programs and making sure that they're accounted for. And then the last one is, are we compliant, federally compliant with our RTP? With it's been so long since I've looked at the acronym for MAP 21. I think that's moving for progress in the 21st century, MAP 21. I blew that acronym somewhere.
Moving ahead.
But moving ahead for progress, and then the
There you
FAST
go.
Act. Thank you. So that's a quick overview of the RTP, and then I would like to bring up the scope and walk through that fairly quickly with you all. It was in your packet, and there have been some changes, minor changes or additions to it. But before I do that, any questions about the RTP? Do you feel like we're generally heading in the right direction with this? Okay. I'm going to stop sharing that screen, and I'm going to bring up the actual scope document, which is where?
Dave, while you're bringing that up,
Yeah.
I can ask just a general question about process with the RTP. It just
Yes.
seems to finish the last one with Stephanie Stearns. Given that it's, how does this going to incorporate what's, city long-range planning with the road networks and all the current planning processes that are already underway? And how will that incorporate that into the new programming or projects, if you will?
I think that's an excellent question, and I'm glad it came from you, Ann, because there's an important element here that I did not mention in the overview. So Mountain Line is due for its 5-year transit plan update, and we're looking at a joint procurement effort with them. I think the proposal right now is to do a joint procurement process for the two efforts, but have separate, so we'd get a singular consultant, but 2 separate contracts in that process, so we could expect a high level of coordination. As far as coordination with other ongoing and existing plans, part of the scope, as many scopes in planning scopes include, is give us a review of existing and ongoing plans and what are the policy implications that we need to move forward. So a good example of that is the Active Transportation Master Plan. That is nearing completion. It's entering its public participation phase and may very well be adopted shortly after we kick this thing off. Just mentioned coordination with the 5-year transit plan effort to the degree that capital projects are committed and underway. I believe Lone Tree Overpass, for example, the city's getting ready to, or is preparing their bid documents and should be out to bid. That's certainly not going to be up for discussion in terms of sequencing. So does that answer your question?
Yes, basically, and thanks for reminding me of the RTP. Just for everyone's edification, Mountain Line would, of course, fund our 5-year transit plan that would not be funded through the Metro plan.
Thank you, Ann.
But the idea is there's value added and savings on indirects through procurement, just that savings of time, effort, staff, and then also the public coordination and outreach. There's some synergies there between the 2 planning efforts. So, we would hope to overall then save both agencies' efforts with that. So. Right.
Thank you. So as I mentioned earlier, there's a budget of $250,000. We've extended the schedule a little bit, and what this would allow us to do is better coordinate with the regional plan effort, particularly in developing scenarios jointly. They'll be underway, and we can develop the scenarios jointly and then evaluate them, and that way there's an absolute dovetail with that. So that's the reason for the highlight there. The highlighted sections are generally from speaking with the land use planning staff, comprehensive planning staff at the city, and then some other comments in terms of coordinating with that regional plan process are in track changes. And the city has been working closely with the county staff on that regional plan process. As mentioned, in terms of the outcomes, we want these advisory 20-year programs that address climate action and other emergency policies. We want strategies for TISMO. And we want, now that we're a new organization, so, Metro Plan, we want this process to bring some awareness and credibility to the organization. The policy and plan background really just outlines all of the different planning processes going on, including the Milton 180 corridor master plans with ADOT, the active transportation plan, and others, including city and county area plans. So the county, for instance, is doing the Donny Park plan right now. That needs to be discussed. We expect Metro Plan and its member agencies to be heavily involved in online survey content and use of the city's community forum for putting that out there. As I mentioned, scope of work, the first two tasks are really, let's make sure we all are on the same page and that we're comfortable with the way the project will be managed. For public involvement, we want to highlight that virtual meetings and online to be expected. We talk about the IAP2 spectrum in terms of how we want the community involved, and really this policy analysis as part of that. With the background, we want these to tie in closely with public involvement, goals and measurements, and equity analysis, so that this background report incorporates and sets up parts of those. So we want community data and demographics, and we want that tied into the model, the transportation model, so we don't see duplications of effort. Again, this is an opportunity to coordinate with Mountain Line and the regional plan, review of current plans, trends and conditions, and here's that land development, and provide a review of some high density projects, as well as a brief literature review of long-term trends related to COVID-19. Develop a strong base network model and identify, using the metric, what some of the trends are or issues that we see there. And then, part of the public participation should be a needs survey, and we should include that as part of the background. Any good plan has goals, policies, objectives, and we want performance metrics and targets. And as part of the benchmarking, we would like to see, what's happening with travel demand management, Vision Zero, which is a safety program, and efforts towards mode shift to assist in policy development. And some of those are going to tie directly to this climate emergency, which, the goal is carbon neutrality by 2030, which is very aggressive. And transportation, we know, is, I think, the largest. It's got a plurality, I think, of the contributions in the region to greenhouse gas emissions. So what does that look like? We want the consultant to update those tools that I talked about, the model scenarios, build out scenarios. And again, that's to set up the regional plan, so we'll work in coordination with them. The cost estimation tool and the benefit cost analysis tool. Along with equity and accessibility analysis, the question came up, if we have longstanding communities, Title VI communities of need, and we have communities that are or have shifted strong to second home communities. Is there an equity question at work there in terms of where we make investments? And so that would be some of the things that we'd look at. Project selection and scoring, looking at anticipating grant priorities, and trying to use our project selection and scoring to help inform those grant priorities. So we want to look at the methodology. We want to use that benefit cost ratio tool within that process and engage the public in evaluating of criteria. And we've just gone through a similar exercise with the public on the Milton and 180 corridor plans. Cost is fairly straightforward. Basically, when we want to inflate things, bring them up to date, we want to include the life cycle costs. For funding analysis, one of the things that we heard, and again, it ties into this question of federal funding, is how do we develop flexible funding strategies to meet those unanticipated but defensively high priority transportation needs? And yes, if we can prepare in advance and get things in capital improvement programs, that would be the best way to do it. But are there appropriate means of preparing a little more flexibility into our processes? As I mentioned, we want to come up with programming recommendation and looking really at alternatives and viewed through these screens, like I mentioned, of equity, climate action. And at this point, it's really a programming recommendation. I don't know that we're, I think it's open for discussion whether we make a final call on that. And then compliance. So scoring is kind of your standard, although we do want them to demonstrate this understanding of the IAP2. So with that, I'm going to stop. I know that was very quick, but if we're on the right track, we'd like to move forward. Our goal is to get, for the strategic work plan, is to have somebody on board by the end of December. And to reach that goal, we should be out the door here pretty soon with a request for proposals. So happy to take any feedback, answer any questions. Thank you for your time.
Is there any questions or discussion that the TAC would like to have with Dave on the RTP? Know that we only have 10 minutes left of the meeting.
Mr. Chair, a quick question of Dave.
Go ahead, John.
Yeah, Dave, were you going to use the Simpo on-call? I'm just curious if that's going to help facilitate getting a consultant on board, in the time frame. It's not super critical. I'm just curious.
Mr. Chair, John, to keep it short, no. We're going to.
Okay. Very good.
Chair, I have a quick question.
Go ahead, Dan.
Really comment to Dave. Great. I think the scope for RTP looks great. Just encourage you to reach out to Mountain Line. Busy Collins will be scoping the 5-year, a similar scope, to get into your procurement. So to coordinate, just let her know deadlines for your procurement process.
Thank you, Ann. I think I have a meeting with Busy on the 31st.
Any further discussion or questions for Dave on the RTP?
I guess I'll defer to the executive director, if I may, Mr. Chair. Are we looking for formal action, or can we move ahead with where we're at right now?
There were sirens going back. Was that question for me, Dave?
Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, I don't think that we need formal action. You got direction from the TAC, and that's enough for us to move forward. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
If there's no more questions on the RTP or discussion on the RTP, Dave and Jeff, it sounded like you guys may want to go over items G and H prior to items F.
Actually, no. I think at this point we can go back to order.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we'll go to item F, the Advanced Transportation Congestion Mitigation Technology Deployment Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So as has been mentioned earlier, based on the strategic work plan that came out of the advance and the priorities that were set, Metro Plan, embarked on working with the city to draft this grant, and we went through a scoping process. And as I was already mentioned, we have elected, in consultation with the city to defer this to next year. The grant is a 50-50 match. There's $60 million available annually, and about 10 awards are made annually. So it seems like a fairly low amount of money, but applications range, from kind of 30 to 60. So the odds are pretty good of getting an award. As mentioned earlier in the TIP discussion, we're recommending we put this in for a relatively high dollar because of the recent awareness. Literally, I think it was 2 days after we decided to defer the grant, I was contacted about this significant investment, potential significant investment in the fiber optics. And the fiber optics would be a big part of the plan to make smart signals work, to make other communications work. We look forward to working with our partners on this. As Jeff mentioned, I think there was a fair amount of support for it. Some of the issues that need to be addressed are clearly as discussed. Where's the match come from? How much is that? And I think the operations and maintenance of that system. There's recession planning going on at the city, and managing additional signals and infrastructure is challenging. So how can we manage maybe through the grant funds to create opportunities for that? And then I think with the long haul fiber and the time, we can really put together a strong list of partners, not just letters of support, but actually investments into the grant. Look forward to working with everybody on that going forward. And I guess the last thing I will say is we've got some excellent input on a broad range of technology applications during the scoping process. And we're working on putting that into a regional ITS strategy or framework structured on the different technologies that are eligible under the grant. So that concludes my discussion on the technology deployment grant. If there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Are there any questions or discussion for Dave on the ATCM TD grant?
No.
Nope. All right. We have 5 minutes left. Let's try to get as far as we can. Dave on the next one, or is it Jeff on the next one? Jeff on the next one, the $50,000 Metro Plan mini grant?
Yes, Mr. Chairman and members of the TAC. This is a grant. I'm recommending that the board consider criteria for releasing a competitive Metro Plan mini grant to member agencies. This came out of the strategic advance. One of the TAC members said it would be great if we could start putting money back towards small projects. So I went ahead and drafted out some criteria. I just lost the place on the agenda, I apologize. But those criteria in your packet, obviously we don't have a lot of time. We don't have time to go into them in detail. This is not time sensitive. I can easily bring this back next month. I want to point out that I think we have Jeff Bowman from the City of Flagstaff, but 2 other City of Flagstaff TAC members are not here. And I know this is of interest to them. So I can either bring it back next month, or if people are feeling thrilled about it the way it is, you could offer support or feedback right now.
Is there any discussion or question for Jeff?
Looks like a nice opportunity, and thank you for crafting a competitive grant. And I think tabling it or just bringing it to your board as needed, and look forward to hearing the next steps.
Thank you.
Okay, we have 3 more minutes. So let's go to the low interest loan recommendation.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the TAC. This is largely information that the TAC has seen before. The Metro Plan presented to the Build America Bureau a project that really looked at several projects, including underpasses and overpasses of the railroad and the downtown connection center, and to see if there was possibility for using their low interest loan programs, TIFIA and RIF, RIF being for railroad, TIFIA being for general improvements. We soon discovered, because of, the Rio was part and parcel with that and was very uncertain at the time, that was not a good bundle of projects to move forward. But because of these very low interest loans, which were further enhanced by being rural, which would cut those loan rates in half to, at one point, as low as 0.5%, it just seemed really exciting to explore whether that would be advantageous for things like the Lone Tree Overpass. So using the overpass as a trial project, but really looking at all of the 419 and 420 projects for which there were funding streams. Metro Plan worked with the Build America Bureau, with Federal Highways, Arizona Division, and the city to examine this. And long story short is there is a premium for doing federal projects. We estimated it based on research at about 20%. We've heard as high as 40%. Haven't really heard anything lower than 20%. We did look at all these projects and did, I think, a pretty good screening on whether they would, what level of NEPA they would require, because when you take these loans, it triggers, federalization. And on our assessment, even with a good spread of 4% to 0.5% on the interest, that premium basically washed out the interest savings. And so at this point, it's our recommendation to the board that we defer the decision to the city, and that the executive director kind of present a report on this to the city, or communicate that to the city. So that's where we stand on the low interest loans. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any questions for Dave or discussion for Dave on this one? Or is Metro Plan asking for an action from the TAC on this one, or is this a discussion only?
Discussion only.
Okay. All right. Well, if there's no questions on that, for the future items from Executive Director, Jeff, do you have anything?
No, I just want to thank you all for being here. Thank Dave for all the work he's done on these grants and RTP, and I have nothing else to add.
Okay. For future agenda items, I'm going to make a recommendation of adding the 50,000 Metro Plan mini grants back on there, and just dive in a little bit deeper into the criteria and stuff like that for the next meeting.
Will do.
Does anybody else have any future agenda items they want to include?
No, I don't think so.
I just have a kudos for ADOT and the McConnell sidewalk in coordination with NAU and getting that built this year. Yay.
Good deal.
Thank you. It turned my hair a little bit grayer. We got it done.
Yeah. All right.
I guess that's going to be it for the meeting. So we'll adjourn this meeting at 3:31. Thank you, everybody.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
See y'all.